Action. Hey guys, Bruce and Emma here.
Welcome to the Hidden Pearls podcast.
And this week we are in week 12. I think it is game 11. This weekend, the Niners are at home playing the Saints. So we're excited about that one after a big win down in Mexico City. And just a shout out to our trip in Mexico City.
Wow.
People, the stadium, everywhere we went, it was unbelievable, the welcome. And it just was unbelievable trip. So we were super excited.
And everybody who came to the invasion and watched Bruce spread the fire. Let's go. If you haven't watched it, it's on our Instagram. Please go check it out.
The guy sent me that whole video.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay, got it. All right. Anyway, so there you go. But we're super excited this week with the holidays coming up, and just with the populations that we work with. And it's really, I think, true for everybody. Holidays can be really wonderful, but they can also be really triggering because sometimes going back to visit family, those situations and all that kind of stuff where we grew up can be really tough. So we wanted to talk more about it because, as you guys know, we talk a lot about it's okay not to be okay, but we want to get some help and we want to talk about it. So in these situations, we invited Suzi Landolphi, who is the clinical director for emerging vets and players. So she's got an MA in clinical and community therapy and such. And so she's worked a lot. So that's really our exposure to her, but she's done a lot of other things. You guys remember our Sweet Bow Equine Healing episode? Suzi was part of the staff that was there and helped with those folks putting that on. And so this is a great show. Really hope you enjoy it. She talks a lot about just some of the things and philosophies that she has, thinking a little bit outside the box. And again, that reminder about it's okay not to be okay. So super high energy. If you're looking for kind of normal, don't watch the show because it's not, but it's super fun that way. And I think it'll give you some ideas and tips about setting boundaries, being true to yourself and staying curious in life and discovering who you are and how you want to be. And then go and find a tribe that lines up with you so you have a tribe to be who you want to be. So enjoy the show. I think it's great. And look for another Niner victory.
Bruce.
3, 2, 1, action. Okay.
Oh, I want to do that with you.
Okay.
Here we go. Take 2. 3, 2, 1, action. Nice. Okay. Now we're live.
Welcome to the Hidden Pearls podcast.
Not so hidden, thank God. Like the more it's not hidden, the better.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We agree.
Landolphi, like a dolphin.
Yes, a land dolphin instead of a sea dolphin.
She's about 12 different things. But anyway, we know her as the clinical director for emerging vets and players. So we're super excited about that. And just with the holidays coming up, we've been wanting to have her on, but with our folks, at least in our categories that we get exposure to, increasing kind of heightened stress and anxiety as people get closer to the holidays, having to see family, have expectations placed on, and all that. So we just thought it'd be a great opportunity to have Suzi on, who works with so many of our folks and has conversations with them and all that kind of stuff, and just trying to normalize that experience, just to talk a little bit about the stressors around this time of year. But as we got going, and we were just hearing stories about unicorns and rainbows and all that kind of stuff, so we thought we might as well plug this nickel. Okay, so you're telling us a story about the unicorns.
Yeah, so when I was doing AIDS education, and I put it in a format of what I would say would be humor about how we can't talk about sexuality. So we have the huge AIDS crisis, and we as a country can't talk honestly about sex, but they want everybody to practice safer sex. So I put it in sort of a funny format, and I go around the country and I'm talking to everybody around the country in big concert halls. And I got sued by the religious right, the Rutherford Institute, for $3.4 million, a federal lawsuit, because I was invited into a high school to talk about safer sex. And the Rutherford Institute was created by Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson. And so they started this series of a lawsuit, and I was defended by the Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders of Boston, an amazing group. And we started to go through the process, and we kept winning every decision by every lower court. And it finally went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court looked at the decision of the lower court and said, lower court got it right. We are in favor of Suzi Landolphi and Hot, Sexy, and Safer, which was the name of my presentation. And so we set a precedent. so that people can go in, be invited into high schools to talk about sexuality without the fear of getting sued, because it was a federal lawsuit. It was for child endangerment, child sexual harassment. So here's the end of the story. I'm at the Bill Maher show. It's New Year's Eve. It's months after we won this decision. And I'm in the green room hanging out with a friend, and Mr. Falwell is on the stage. And then the show ends. It's New Year's Eve in New York City. He comes off the stage and assumes that everybody wants to shake his hand. Okay, he can make that assumption. And I say to my girlfriend, watch this. And he goes around, hi, I'm Jerry Falwell. Hi, I'm Jerry Falwell. Hi. And he finally gets to me. Now, I've been on his broadcasting network. They always used to show pictures of me in video, but say things I didn't say. And he walks right up to me and doesn't realize who I am and said, hi, I'm Jerry Falwell. And I took his hand and grabbed it with the other hand, said, I am Suzi Landolphi. And he pulled it away and left the room as quickly as possible. And I tell you that story only because you were talking about transitions. Sometimes we're not just transitioning ourselves. We might be transitioning a whole country, a whole population, a whole group of people. We might be helping transition from saying that you're kind, loving, and support diversity and then not. So just wanted to share that with you.
That's good. Well, as a lawyer, I kind of appreciate that. So, and I think it's really interesting because it brings up a whole nother issue, which we don't have to do today, but the recent restrictions on talking about, white supremacy and such, like we're out of Tennessee, all kinds of restrictions on what teachers can say and talk about in a bunch of different categories. So all of which seems really frightening that we don't trust our teachers and Board of Education alone to do what they're doing. But we'll come back to some of that stuff. So good for you on Jerry. That's good stuff. All right. Well, listen, so what we got, so again, part of MVP, clinical director, that's how we kind of know you and got introduced to you, but we've gotten to know you more and beyond that. And so we just want to touch base a little bit. We want to get you on right now to talk about kind of the holidays and some of the things. So your story is really fascinating one. It talks about transitions in and out of a lot of different things. And like you said, sometimes it's our own personal transition and kind of the micro sense. But as we do those things, it has ripple effects into bigger macro applications sometimes. And it's great to be aware of those things and to take advantage of those opportunities when we can. So, but we particularly want to just talk about the health of, everybody really, but our focus has been on veterans and triggering things out of the holidays and all that kind of stuff. And so we have a little bit of a script and it is kind of all over, which is pretty exciting. So that's really fun. So we'll come back to unicorns and rainbows a little bit later. So I guess we'd like to start a little bit though. So I know back in 2003, you went back to school, got a master's degree in clinical and community psychology from Antioch. And I guess before we get to that whole story, we always kind of like to know about where you came from, just a little bit in your family of origin, just because of how that tends to shape us a little bit. And so if you're comfortable with that, just a little bit about that and maybe some of the lessons or ways in which your family of origin shaped you. And you already told us about your brother. So that would be great. You can share that with us or whatever kind of fits in.
So I would say it shaped me and maybe most of us a lot. I mean, if you think about it, you learned how to eat, poop, talk, and everything else from your family. Why wouldn't you learn how to be anxious? Why wouldn't you learn how to be depressed? Right. Why wouldn't you learn about fear and sadness and anger and controlling and reward and punishment? You're going to learn everything from your childhood until you decide and start getting out into the bigger world and go, oh, wait a minute, not every family does that. No, not every family does that. So between family, culture, the world, you're getting a lot of information. So all of a sudden now you're an adult. You have all this training. I like to call it your first basic training for all those veterans. And you're supposed to go back into a family to have a great dinner once a year. And you said the word trigger. With all of that shit that's like underneath the turkey, it's like underneath the platter, it's underneath the table. And we think somehow we're going to be able to navigate that easily with the undercurrents that are through our families. And there hurts, there's fears and sadnesses that have never been talked about. And we go in trying to, keep it all together. So I would say it's even harder for the military men and women because when they go on a mission, that shit is out in the open. This is the enemy. This is what we're doing. Here's the plan. get your ammo ready. Like they're and the same for athletes. Think about it. When they go on that field or on that court or wherever, they're going in with a plan and they're going to do their best and they're not going to lie. They're not going to lie. They're going to try their hardest to win that game in any way that they can, and the same with the veterans. So what's the biggest stressor about going home for the holidays or being with your family? Probably the dishonesty that's never been talked about, that's sitting under the table all the time.
I had a conversation with one of my clients where there was something that she's just been like, she danced around it for about 6 months, and finally we started getting into it. And halfway through, she goes, it feels like I've put so much stuff under the rug that I just can't even walk on the rug anymore.
Yeah, you'll trip.
I can't get over it anymore, know? And so that's kind of how I always try to think of it. It's like, just because it's out of sight doesn't mean it's gone.
That's right. So Bruce, just to answer your question, first of all, you have to have two things. And they begin with SA. What the veterans taught me was situational awareness. So when you're going down range and you're going down on that battlefield, you better be able to see everything around you and what's going on, and to understand all that's out there that could come after you and how things can change. So they shorten it to SA, like they do everything that they talk about. And as I'm working with them, they taught me to look at SA, outside of me. But I was trained to look at SA, which is self-awareness, inside of me. Because I might be the threat I'm looking for. Just think about that for a second, right? So I would say, Bruce, that the most important thing to bring to the holiday is the situational awareness of what happened in the past, what's happening now outside of you, what you can control, change, what you can't. More importantly, what are you bringing? What are you bringing to that Christmas, that Hanukkah, that Kwanzaa, celebration? And are you actually celebrating, or are you tolerating? So there's celebrating and there's tolerating. And I think you got to be aware of what it is you can actually do and not do, what you can put up with and what you can't. I always say, being on with a conversation with someone that's difficult, that you have a real hurtful past from, or even continuing into the present, you want to be able to have great 10 minutes, not terrible 5 hours. So one of the most important things to do is to know what you can do and what you can't do, and know what they can do and they can't do. So that if you do want to go and you do want to spend some time, operative word, some, that's right. This is where smaller amounts, better. It's the same on your plate, so you don't feel terrible after you eat everything on the plate. You can always have it tomorrow. So that's one of my biggest practices. And I don't call them tips or tools. I call them practices, because I have to do them every day. Considering what I grew up in, if I don't do them every day, I am actually called back to the wild. I have a default that was, given to me, trained to me by my ancestors, my immediate ones and ones before. So I'm really clear that if I practice every day, I have a better chance of being the person I deserve to be and my family deserves me to be.
Yeah. Let's take a little step back into that, though, then. So tell us a little bit about that family of origin, how that shaped you and what lessons came out of there, because you kind of dodged that when we opened that up. So, and if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. So this is not, Yeah,
I want to talk about it. It's crazy.
I mean, we don't have to do the whole thing, but I guess, everybody's a little bit different about that, how they shaped them. So some, it was really, what they felt was, I guess, healthy, nurturing, grounding and all that kind of stuff. And we learned some great lessons about work ethic and blah, blah, blah. And then we've certainly had some folks like, it was a shit show. Dad walked out. Mom wasn't around very much. We survived, my brother and I. We were fighting on the streets, all that kind of stuff. So we've all kinds of stories out there. So just wondering kind of what lessons, so as you're leaving adolescence, high school and that kind of stuff, how did the world look and what lessons did you take from that family of origin?
I really appreciate that. So what I didn't realize when I first started to take a look at my past was I first had to see all the hurt, all the fear and sadness, all the trauma that went literally through the bloodlines of both my parents and their ancestors. What I wasn't clear of was all the post-traumatic growth, Dr. Bruce Perry talks about post-traumatic wisdom, which I actually like that term as well. So I got both. And I think most of us did, meaning that this idea that when parents walked out, when they were struggling with substance abuse, all of that, I don't care if the worst horrific child abuse and neglect in situations, there still is something to be gained from that. These children oftentimes grow up to be some of the wisest adults. And by the way, 35% of all veterans go into the military with PTSD. They go in from these childhoods and they go downrange, and they're some of the best soldiers we have. So when they come back to that family and they go back into a situation that they've never told anybody about and they fall apart, everybody assumes it's downrange, but it's not. So like me, that's my story. I arose to the occasion as a little girl because the entire family was struggling with substance abuse. There's only 5 of us. That's me. And my mother, father, sister, brother all struggled. So one of us had to pay the rent. One of us had to do. And even though my bio dad was a successful restaurateur, he's son of Italian immigrant, he, from his own trauma, was very abusive. So I constantly got the message that I wasn't wanted and I wasn't good enough. I don't care if I got all A's, I wasn't good enough. So that is an issue that I continually still work with and understand, because he also gave me my 2 greatest gifts, my superpowers. He was the first person to dance with me, and all of a sudden he looked down and saw this little girl that could dance and do any step that you wanted to do, having never seen them. And he was a great entrepreneur. And I went and opened a condom store in the middle of an AIDS crisis, and I had no business doing that. I didn't know how to open a store in the middle of New York City. So these things, these families are difficult because we get these superpowers and we get these super hurts. We get both. The good news is my mom, who is a social justice warrior, so my mom was blonde, blue-eyed, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, a direct descendant of the witch trials, Dorothy Putnam Beckford. My bio dad was a son of Italian immigrant. And then when my mom and dad split 5 years later, my mom, because of my dancing ability, met my stepfather, who is, ready for this, Native American, Penobscot tribe from Old Town, Maine. So Native American, Black, and Italian. So wow. There we go. So I had a family that was blonde and blue-eyed to the darkest dark of, we always used to joke and say, Uncle Otis, who played the trumpet in the band, looked exactly like Louis Armstrong and sounded like him. So that was the range of our family. I'll actually send you a picture because you'll appreciate it. So now I'm in a mixed race family in 1960. I'm in a mixed race family. There's still a law on the books in Massachusetts that Black and white cannot marry. It was on the books. No one was enforcing it. So I grew up with this amazing experience of being in this Black family. And I'll just give you one example of why it's traumatic and why it's creating superpowers. So I had a wonderful Black aunt named Aunt Cindy, and she used to sit in a chair next to her door, and the door of her room was on this corridor in the house, so she could see everybody walk by. And this is how I was raised. She's tatting, which is like crocheting, but much older. And I come upstairs to Aunt Cindy, beautiful old Black woman, and I'm crying. And this is how I was comforted. Aunt Cindy, so-and-so said such and such. What do you say? So-and-so said such and such. Well, you just don't worry about your crying. Now you keep crying. It's okay to cry. Because you know why? Because the more you cry, the less you pee. Mm-hmm. So that's how I was raised.
Pretty comforting.
Pretty comforting, right? And I walked away going, good wisdom. And I walked away. So my childhood, my brother's gay. I had an older sister, 18 months older. And just to put a bow on it, the 5 of us, my dad died when I was 24 of an aneurysm. My mom died of throat cancer. My sister was killed in a head-on collision in her van after getting her nails done. And my brother died from an accidental overdose after being very successful business person in New York City. So they all died at the age of 56. My father, mother, sister, and brother. He actually died at 57. So my daughter, with her wonderfully dark sense of humor, when I turned 56, every day I would wake up, and I don't care where I was, if I was with her or not, she'd call me up and go, "You still here?" I go, "I'm still here." So we have family traditions that we get to break. And all those people, wonderful people in my family that died, all came from trauma.
Suzi,
And
when you say ancestral trauma, how far back are you going?
well, if you think ancestral trauma, then you would think of what it was like for Italian immigrants to come here and what they were called. If you want to go way back with my mother, the witch trials. Now, she was from the side of the family that was accused of being witches, not doing the accusing, because there were two sides to the Putnam family. Certainly in my Black family, and my sister married into a Black family as well, all kinds of historical trauma. So we've got to take a look. I always wanted to do an ancestry.com that would look at your trauma, not just, your bloodline, because I think you'd get more out of it. So it's important to understand all the traumas that come down. My dad was very clear, my stepdad, about Native American trauma and what that looked like, and how that was informing so much about himself and his children, my step family. So I think, Emma, you want to take a look at everything, not to blame, not to fall down behind, but to find the gifts, to find the strengths, and to find the hurts, to know that it was harder. The women, and what's our ancestral history just as women. So I think it's really, really important to take a look at everything. Know yourself. You say that all the time, Bruce. Know thyself, right? So know thyself and where you came from. I think
and Suzi, are you there's a lot of research over the last 5+ years that, in addition to the kind of the legacy trauma, ancestry trauma that we pass on, maybe subconsciously or consciously, through abusive, anger, whatever, those rules that we handle, all that kind of stuff. So that stuff, but yet there's actual evidence where genetically big T trauma gets transferred because consistent application or suffering from the big T trauma particularly, but also cumulative small t, that it actually impacts the genes, and those genes can be passed on through mother to child. And so that it actually, it increases kind of the stress levels. It impacts the way in which people can deal with anxiety, stress, and those kind of things. So are you in that camp as well? Do you kind of
I sure am. And it's not just mother, it's father too.
Right.
So it's called epigenetics.
Yeah.
Now, the fact is everything's made from cells. So genes are made from cells. You get a new set of cells every 7 years. People don't know that. And I always say to them, well, if that's true, how come I'm not tall like Emma now? Because that's what I'm wishing to be. And I want my cells to be that. So what's really important to understand is that
it's like she's regenerating, right?
I know, yeah. Taller.
The unicorn regenerating.
That's it. Right? That's exactly right. So Bruce, what you're saying is so important. Trauma just means that the body and the mind and the emotions, and by the way, the mind and the emotions now we know are the same. So that's good news. It's not your emotions are separate from your mind. They're all commingled, as is the body. So when you put your body, your mind, and your emotions through too much trauma, it physically changes you chemically. Chemically. I was talking to a veteran today about all the years and years and years of trauma and how he's manifesting now physical ailments from that. Kaiser Permanente did a study, 15,000 people, 50 and older, and the ones that had the worst aging diseases had the worst childhoods. From at 50, it started to show up. So if we don't understand that, if we can say a chemical can change your cells. So my grandson got leukemia. So that's the body attacking itself. That means it's not working. We don't know if it's environmental or what caused it. In fact, no one knows yet exactly what caused. We know a few chemicals that can do it. Then we now know then that our own chemistry can hurt us when it's put under too much pressure. Childhood abuse can change the brain development. Let's think about that. So if you're talking about 3 or 4 generations from the Holocaust, And those men and women that suffered that put their bodies were put, I should say, through so much horror. Why wouldn't we really embrace the idea that that changed their chemistry, their genes, their cells? And then when the cell and the sperm get together, of course, that material is going to be passed down. Here's the good news, though. I don't want anybody to ever believe that the body is not capable, the heart, mind, body is not capable of healing. We can heal a lot. I don't mean 100% that everything can be fixed. I'm just saying it's always looking for that way to be that works. The body doesn't want to fall apart. It will always, and the mind will always fight to be better.
So just going off of that, I also just want to point out that when people are saying, like, I can handle the stress, or I only need to sleep 5 hours a day, or I'm fine, like, over time, you're not fine. And there's no barometer, and there's no, like, unless you're like under the microphone, or like, unless you're just being tested all the time and you're always under watchful vision, we don't know when that shift starts to happen. And so I think there's such toxic culture, and I think it's starting to change, but a lot of times it's just, I'm fine and I'm going to be okay and I can handle the stress. And now what we're seeing, like you were saying, like through epigenetics and genetic testing, is that we're really not okay.
No, we're not okay. And go back to that, what I said about the 15,000 Kaiser Permanente patients who literally from 50 on, when they start to get diabetes and high blood pressure, oh, it's just how I eat and I'm not exercising. No, it's not. It's a lot more than that. So, Emma, how do you think we get that idea that we should push through, that we can take on a lot, that we don't deserve to rest, that we like, where do you think we get that idea that I'm okay when now we know we're not? What drives that thought and that behavior? What does it drive for you?
I was actually just listening to something on this, but it's kind of I feel like the whole vibe, I guess I would say, or the whole like intent or just focus of, I think kind of just America in general, is this very individual culture where it's, I can stand on my own feet. I have this power. I have to be hyper successful, or like the genius myth, right? About how geniuses stand on their own. And I mean, even if we're looking at George and we're calling him like a football genius or whatever, it's so false to think that he's standing there on his own, because there's so many people who are training him, helping him study. And I can't remember what it's called, but Kate Blanchett is now coming up with, it's a movie about, she's a orchestrator, or she's a maestro or something, but it's just discussing the genius myth and how it's not about standing on your own. And I think when we start to really individualize ourselves and feel like we have to do everything on our own, I think personally for me, it's when I start to separate myself from other people and think that I don't need help. That's when I have to be okay. Because if I'm not okay, then these things aren't going to get done, or I'm not going to find the success, or I'm not going to achieve the things that I want to achieve.
So I call it the myth of independence.
Yeah.
Right. There's no such thing as independence. I don't know about you. I didn't make this shirt. I didn't make this lamp.
Did you make the dress? Did you make the dress behind you?
I didn't make that dress. See that wonderful dress I'm going to wear with my unicorn? I bought that on Amazon. Okay. So if I didn't make anything that I have on me, although there is a sweater in there that I knit, I actually knit a hoodie.
Did you make the wool?
Huh?
Did you make the wool?
She grew it.
It was
Suzi,
so
wait,
cool.
before you go off, I just want to, like, I'm just going to tie this in, and I can't remember if you on one of I brought this up a couple times in different MVP huddles, but I mean, for me, it was like, like as a little kid, I mean, John Wayne was everything.
That's
like
right.
John Wayne. And I'm just saying, so the model for John Wayne, was like fucking shoot or punch first. You never talk about your feelings, no matter, you might have the arrow through the shoulder, you just rip it out, you spit on it, pour whiskey, tuck a bandana on it, and you get back on your horse and you go back into battle. It's like that whole thing. And then even, you remember the one with Maureen O'Hara where he's in Ireland and he drags her by the hair?
Yes.
Like the whole thing with women, there's no courtship. It's all this, like, it's dominance, independence, the toughest person wins. And if you acknowledge any pain, anything that's out of line, you're a complete wimp and you're back to the end of the line. And so it's just like this over and over. And John, I just mentioned because, you all thought it was kind of cool, but it wasn't until like 20 years later, I'm hitting my 40s and I'm looking back going, Well, that was so fucked up. You know what I mean? Because like the lessons that we got, and everybody just looked around at each other and pretended like this is okay. And they pretended like that's really how it was. You know, everybody was more fucked up back then than we thought, and nobody wanted to talk about it. And so some of the, and we could talk about all kinds of the Western attributes after that. But anyway, I just mean that was one, those were lessons that I spent decades on learning, you know what I mean? Because it was so fucked up about the way you were thought and that male mentality. And I think you're right, the gender issues are really big too. But anyway, just toss that out. And I think sometimes we don't appreciate, and I want to tie this back to what you said earlier, is that, when we go back home, we fall into those weird kind of, old relationships. They're always set up the way they were. And then it's like, I think we also spend a lot of time unlearning the rules that our family somehow traditionally handed off to us. Like I said from people all the time, I go, well, I hear what you're saying. Is that your rule, or who gave you that rule? Where'd that come from? Because
the aunt that you always say.
Yeah.
The aunt name that you always use.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
What do you mean? Wait a minute. Emma just remembered something about you.
Whenever he does this example, he's always like, is it Aunt like Margaret or Winifred or like, it's like the oldest name I've never heard anybody name this.
Yeah. Like Aunt Bertha, it's like, I always say, well, did Aunt Bertha give you that? It's like, because like, where the hell did that come from? And why are you living by rules that somebody you barely even knew gave your mom, and then she handed it to you, and now it's like, oh, I can't do XYZ because, and I go, why the fuck can't you do it? Just do it. You make your own rules now. You're an adult. But anyway.
But they don't trust that. So most of what, and Emma, this is a shortcut to what your dad's saying. Most of what you think about yourself and feel about yourself was either done to you or told to you. Now that should scare the shit out of you.
Thanks,
most of what you think about yourself, well, wait a minute, you got a mom in there too, you got a brother, you got a whole family, you got a whole society. So most of what you think about yourself and feel about yourself was either done to you and told you. And Bruce, what you're asking people to do is to question that.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? And do I want to still subscribe to that? Does it work for me? So if independence is a myth, what is the reality? Interdependence.
Absolutely.
So the same people that shot the arrow that John Wayne pulled out, which he probably could never have done anyway, were interdependent culture. They were not overachievers in terms of have to have more. They took care of one another. Even their definition of a warrior was taking care of the elderly and families. There was no poverty. There was nothing in terms of tribes before the oppression of another society came in.
There was a deep appreciation about the interconnectedness between everybody in the tribe.
Everything.
And everyone was valued. And it was a tribal loss if any one person was left behind, excluded, or had to be put out. It was felt by the entire group instead. And me being a criminal defense lawyer, working in the criminal justice system for all those years, like we're a disposable society.
That's right.
We don't care. We're not asking why this person's this way or where they're at. I mean, I don't want to there's some conversation about it, but overall, the 80s and 90s were about, we're just sending folks away. And if we're going to lock them up and nobody felt bad about it, and it's just what we have to do, and everybody else kind of continues on. So
it's this idea that we would rather say what's wrong with you and give you a diagnosis, which I won't do, even as a licensed therapist, even as a clinical director. What I will do is sit with you and hear your story to find out what happened to you.
That reminds me of the Oro Recovery House, and where there was a director there, and she changed the addiction story from it's not what's wrong with you. Yeah. It's what happens to us, what happened to you, and then unlearning that or trying to heal from those kind of things. So not to we're in a great mood here. So before we got on, we talked a little bit about your hot, sexy, and safer, and that. I don't know if you want to talk any more about that. But somehow you moved on from that. And I think the next place you went was you transitioned from kind of family, marriage, sex, therapist, all that kind of stuff into more of the recovery world, I think, based on what I was reading. So if that's right, why'd you make that transition? And then tell us a little bit more about that. And you can keep going on what you were talking about, but I kind of want to get your story in here as well.
Right. So when I came out to Hollywood, I had a radio show and I had a television show. I had a late night television show called Late Date with Suzi, which doesn't happen anymore because I'm too old. I go to bed early. But anyway, the point is that I got tired of the overachieving, the having to be a certain way on television. I mean, just all of that just got to me. So I thought I'd run off and be a cowgirl. And I went to a ranch and they said, we'll teach you how to gentle wild Mustangs. And when that course allowed me, which I know you guys know because you've done it with me, when it allowed me to touch it, I burst into tears. I saw all my trauma come up instantly, quicker than any therapist, anything I've ever done. I said, I got to go be a therapist so I can go do equine therapy. That's how I got into that. And one day I'm at my ranch and this black van comes down looks like a child abduction van, comes down my driveway. Out gets a guy who's skinny. He's got a funny hat on in one arm. And the woman with him had long black hair like Morticia. And he asked to do a drum circle on my property because he had heard that we had this great space. And we found a space for it. And I said, sure. My stepdad, by the way, was a drummer in the family band. So he had an English accent. And so we made a deal. And he got back in the van and he drove off with a date for the drum circle. And my younger staff come up to me and go, you know who that was? Do you know that? And I go, hey, as long as there's no kids in the back of the van, I'm happy. Like, I don't care who it is. And they go, that's Rick Allen, the one-armed drummer of Def Leppard. And he came to the ranch and did a drum circle with veterans. And that's how I got involved with veterans. And that's how I got involved in recovery. So I'm doing all this kind of disruptor crazy shit. Like I'm not following all the rules of therapy. Yeah. I'm not doing anything unethical or illegal as a therapist, but I'm definitely not following how I was trained to give somebody a diagnosis and then go to a treatment plan. It's not happening.
Well, and Suzi, so you were a psychologist and then transitioned to a therapist.
I'm a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. So I'm a marriage and family therapist. By the way, I would not use marriage and family therapist when I first got that license because gay men and women couldn't get married. So I figured that was hurtful. So I called up the Board of Behavioral Sciences and yelled at them. But anyway, so then Oro, which was called Acadia at the time, they've changed their name, 2 young guys from Canada. They don't know I'm disruptor because Canada's disrupting. They get socialized medicine and all of that stuff. So they're
crazy,
like
bunch of
crazy people. So they see me as cool. And they asked me to be their clinical director. I've got horse shit on the bottom of my shoes and I'm laughing going, guys, you don't want to do this. And they go, no, we do. And that's how I became the clinical director. And then I changed everything there. Like I'm not going to call people names. I'm not going to call you an addict. I'm not going to call you an alcoholic because that's not who you are. That's what you're struggling with. That's the shortcut of what I want to know what happened to you. And then alcohol was actually a source of help for a while. So was drugs. I mean, let's just say that was a solution, not a problem. The problem happened way before. Most people who struggle with drugs and alcohol grew up in a family with drugs and alcohol. So what's their first issue? Wasn't taking it themselves. It was being raised by people who were struggling. And Bruce, that's your support of that idea of that ancestry and that changing, that training as children and the trauma that comes through our families. So I got to be a disruptor once again.
All right. So that's down in LA, Malibu. Yeah. And then your ranch is like a couple hours from there, something like that.
So
you're still doing the horse thing, plus you're going down to there. And what is there a time frame for this at all? Like what years are this?
Yeah, you would ask me about years. Everything is according to how old my daughter was at the time. That's the best thing for me. Like how old was Kirsha at the time when I did that? So I came here when she was like 1920-ish. So I would say like every 10 years, I tend to do something different, right? So I would say that, the 90s was hot, sexy, and safer. And then I came out here. So I'd say the early 2000s was when I started to do therapy and the whole gentling of wild horses and like that. So I've been doing the horse thing now, along with doing other things for almost 22 years.
Wow.
Because I didn't start with horses as a little kid. So that's roughly how it happened. So we're in mid 2000s.
Okay. So you have your little exposure to that. And I know Annie, the Def Leppard drummer, what's his organization? Because I know you told me once that
the Raven Drum Foundation.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. You guys got to get him on your podcast.
I know. He's on my I got a list because you gave him that. And I did hook up with them and they emailed me back. And we just got into the season. So I've kind of let that go. I got to get back to that. So, well, okay. So then you're kind of in that world and all that kind of stuff. So somewhere though, you end up in Virginia. So is Virginia before or after all this?
No, Virginia's after being the
Okay.
clinical director of Oro. So here's what else I do. If you're either a builder or maintainer, very few people are kind of both.
Yeah.
So once you build something, you get bored and you have to leave. Like Bruce is like nodding his head because Emma's going, yeah, that sounds like my dad. So
3 years.
yeah, so I'm the clinical director for 2 years. I change everything. We go from 1.5 houses to 6 houses. Like that's how much we expand by doing it differently. And I look right at the 2 young guys from Canada who I adore and the 2 owners, and I go, okay, I'm out of here. We've got, and they go, we're like, you can't leave now. But I go, yeah, I can, because you built it. You know what you're doing. I picked my successor and out the door because I was invited. I was still working with veterans on the side. I was invited to go out to Virginia to Boulder Crest retreat and help them create a curriculum based on post-traumatic growth. So not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you and what is your superpowers. And we were not going to do the whole thing, veterans are broken. We're just not. So I was able to go out there and work with a bunch of amazing people. We all lived out there and we built this curriculum called Warrior Path. And once again, it gets, we do it for 5 years. We get all this wonderful data that it's working. It's only a 6-day, 7-day program that people come and live at the retreat. We buy another ranch in Tucson where a friend of mine is living. And we get a $20 million donation to expand this around the country. And guess what I did? Okay,
Wow.
see you later. That was great. I don't want to just maintain on. I'm going to just go. I want to go do something different now. And then came back. Definitely wanted to watch my grandson and participate in him going through high school too. And then I got rehooked up to MVP. My daughter knew Jay well. And so I went and volunteered, and then they asked me to be a consultant, and here I still am. Right, which is amazing because it's been almost 3 years. So watch out, 2 more years.
Right. How did your daughter know Jay Glazer?
So Kirsha's one of these Uber organizers, knows how to take care of everybody's life. I don't know how they, I think they met through a friend, and then he asked her to work for him. And so she worked with them, and that's when the idea started to come up about MVP. And she's actually the one that called me, told Jay about what I was doing in Virginia. And we took on Orrin O'Neill from the Raiders. So we're doing these retreats, and we get this idea, and I think it was actually Jay's idea, that said, well, if it works for veterans, will it work for athletes, professional athletes, because that transition thing. So we all said at Boulder Crest and Warrior Path, sure, give us a football player and we'll try it out. So Orrin O'Neill, who I adore, you should look him up. He's doing amazing work with children and computers and all that and music. And he came out and went through a Warrior Path with 5 combat veterans. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience. At first, he didn't believe he belonged there, that he was less than them. He had horrible depression at the time, having had to give up his love and going through his transition. And it was just a great, great experience, which then went back to MVP because we had some data now. We had an experience to say, yes, these men and women belong together.
Right. All right. Hey, and before we leave the Virginia thing, in the development of the Warrior Path, so I mean, I know you kind of said it, like not thinking you're broken, but it's kind of doing an assessment, seeing where you're at, understanding your trauma, your pain, whatever that is, and then seeing and finding opportunities for growth and all that kind of self-awareness kind of pieces. Is there anything else that, because it really, that was a pretty impactful program. It really changed how people were doing things. Were there any other attributes of that particularly fit with veterans? What were some of the things that really made that click with people that made it so successful compared to what people were doing?
The 2 pieces that we can do that the VA can't do, and probably even the professional athletes, they don't really care what's going on in your home, maybe a little bit. They don't really care a lot about what happened to you before you started to get paid by an organization. And they don't really care what happens to you once you get out for the most part. This is a business. So professional athletics is somewhat of a business. Let's just be honest about it. And Yeah, right.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
In
So
what ways
let's-
is it not actually?
Right.
It's,
Yeah, it's a
it's
business.
only a business.
Yeah, so let's go back to the veterans as well. The VA does not care what happened to you before you put that uniform on. And to be perfectly honest, they were forced into taking care of you once you got out. So what does that mean? What Boulder Crest was able to do is to say, we know that shit happened downrange. We get that. We know that if we bring in first responders, even professional athletes, we know that shit happened while you were in your sport or your situation. What we're going to talk about is what happened to you before. We're going to go back. So we were able to come up with a whole, almost took a whole day for them to go back through their childhood and their ancestors. We went back 3 generations so that they could find the historical and family trauma, but they also found the family gifts.
Right.
I would give you a big piece of paper with 3 generations and you got to fill it all in, right? And we gave you a red crayon, a red marker, and you wrote down all the trauma of 3 generations, right down to your own children. Then we gave you a blue marker, and you had to write down all the gifts that you got from that crazy family.
Blue.
Right? It was amazing. And all of a sudden they're looking at this going, wait a minute, I have as much blue as red, but I'm suffering more from the red because I'm focusing more on the red. And so we
Negative bias of the mind.
Yeah. So in the military, your specialty is called your military occupational specialty, MOS. So I changed it to MOS stands for my old story. So they got to go back and take a look at their story. And that's what we were able to do. We were able to do things that the VA just can't do because of how they're set up.
Right. Okay. No, it's, I think that's really important. So, I mean, just understanding that, because we do hear that all the time. I hear that all the time in the huddle. One of the, and you've made that really clear, helping people have an awareness around the trauma that they brought in and the things they'd never dealt with. And the one thing about the military is it's almost like, I don't know, I think of, the old ladies, and they had those cinches and they'd suck everything in and tie it up. It's like, that's what the military does, because your duties are so aligned. There's a core mission and purpose. There's so much discipline. Everything's so organized, and you have somebody telling you what to do all the time. It's bundled so tightly, none of your shit can slip out.
So is sports. So is that's exactly what your son's going through.
You got to work out. You got to show up at 6 a.m. You got to do this. Everything's so tight. There's no room for anything else. And all of this extra emotional bullshit and all that, it's all extra stuff, and you can't do it. And you got to just wrap it all up and leave it. And then all of a sudden you get out of the military or the athletics, and then all of that structure is gone. And then all this shit is just flying out.
But wait, it's worse for the athletes, because you know why? You know what they say? I've heard this more times. So I was helping to raise money for MVP, and I still do. And I would have funders literally say to me, well, why would you put athletes with combat veterans? Athletes retire with a whole bunch of money. I want you to hear this. Like, I can't tell you how many times I had to sit in front of someone. I wanted to go for the juggler. I didn't. And they would say that. They would make these assumptions. Do you know that many of those men and women that get into sports, I know you know this, most of the general public doesn't, they come from traumatic childhoods. That sport saved their life. That they went and worked out all the time and did all this because, God forbid, they didn't even want to go home, some of them. So they have all of that trauma too. So then, do they know how to manage all their money and to do all of this? No. Do most veterans, while they're in the military? No. Ask how many veterans come out with debt, because every time they get the money, they spend it because of that childhood trauma and everything. So now we've got a whole bunch of people that are high achievers. This goes back to you, Emma, this idea of being a high achiever, and they're so wonderful and they're so great, and the world might know them if they're an athlete, and they're falling apart. Who do you think they're going to tell? They're going to go back to the professional sports people and say, hey, I'm really struggling. Can you help me?
I wouldn't go any very far anyway. And to add on to your point, I think the stat at least came out by the NFLPA and the NFL, roughly approximately 80% of the men who participate in the NFL within 5 years after leaving the NFL or ending their career have no money left from their professional career.
And go look at their childhood and you'll find out why. Yeah,
well, it's partly that, but the other part is people don't also understand. I mean, the NFL is like a pyramid. I mean, and I'm not, but like some of the guys are making, 500, 750,000, which sounds like a lot, but like if you're living in California, 750,000 a year is not a shit ton of money. So there's like 10 to 15% at the top of the pyramid that make all those are the contracts everybody hears. There is a shit ton of guys on a 58 team roster plus 16 on the practice squad. Bunch of folks living on much less than that.
Same in the military.
And it's still, I mean, it's good money compared to like, doing some other kind of physical labor stuff, but it's not end of work money. It's not like I'm set up for the rest of my life money unless you super squeeze it. So you have the combination of everything you're talking about, plus you have these 4 or 5 years where you're living it and you're having fun, you're doing all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden that gets cut off.
That's right.
It doesn't last very long. So, I mean, that's another compounding factor.
Yeah. And adding that, like so I love that 80%, right? Wouldn't it be nice? Because now we know that 35% of men and women go into the military from horrific childhoods. 35%, that's millions of people that came in looking for support, right, looking to be cared for, looking for value, looking for camaraderie, all of that. What makes us think when they get released that they're going to be able to manage their retirement, managing their world once they go back? They're going back to a place that is a scene of a crime that they've never talked about. How many professional athletes are doing the same thing? How could they manage that money if they came from situations where none of it was managed well? So you're right. You got a shit show of a soup of trauma that's never talked about.
Right. Okay. All right. Let me ask you this then. So in this, as you make this transition from kind of family, sex, and that, and then you get into more of the recovery stuff, and you're doing all that, and now you're really starting to focus on veterans. You got the Virginia thing going, and you got the horses and all that kind of stuff going. So you've been in this for a little bit while now. So what core, have you had some major kind of like, wow, I didn't know that? Or like, what have been some lessons for you both personally as just an individual working in these fields? And then also just kind of lessons. I'm always curious about how every once in a while I step back and I go, wow, I didn't see that a long time ago. Just like the forest for the trees kind of thing. Yep. Have you had some kind of like, wow, I didn't know that about humanity or culture or society or anything like that either. So are there a couple of those kind of big nuggets that have stood out for you at times that you go, wow, and then you've kind of built from there?
Every day. But probably the biggest nugget of my work of being what I would say, starting a mental health evolution. And that's for all of us. That's not just for therapists. When we create a system or a practice that has to keep coming within guidelines, and I'm not saying they're necessarily bad, but they're like laws. If laws aren't based on principles, then I'm not necessarily going to follow it. There was a law in the books that I told you earlier. Black and white couldn't get married. We didn't follow it because it wasn't principled. It's the same with being a therapist and the same about mental health. So the idea then for me, what every day happens to me is, what is a mental health evolution? How did we not get this right? If being gay was a mental health disorder up until 1973, I want you to think my daughter was born in 1973. If you were gay, you were in the DSM.
Right.
The APA, the American Psychological Association, a year and a half ago, made an announcement that they want to apologize for supporting systemic racism. The American Psychological, that's like the AMA to us. Right. Supporting, it's this idea that we get to learn something and then we follow in that footsteps, never taking a look at the footsteps going, wait a minute, this path is hurtful. This path is hurtful to people, not helpful. So therefore, we have to keep evolving. You did it in your social justice work. You went into a prison as a lawyer. You're supposed to put people in prison, right? Or defend them from going to prison. But you did even further. You went into the prison because you knew something was wrong about that system that we were all supporting. Same for you. You're breaking the rules.
Well, my first year law school, my first semester law school property class. This is one, and I kind of was aware of this, but you just go on living and you don't but anyway, it was a story about a man on his death, but he dies, very rich in the South. Anyway, and he had given the key to his, kind of homemaker, and in the lockbox was title to the property and all that. And everybody heard him say this, here's this key, and I want you to have everything that is in this lockbox, everything. So there was no dispute about that. But anyway, and there's some issues about land being transferred that way, but there was a lot of other things in there that under the current law would have been fine. But anyway, of course, he's a white dude, she's black. Anyway, and so I can't remember what I want to say Alabama, but I don't know for sure. But anyway, he got up there. And of course, the Supreme Court overturned and said, no, that's not an effective gift. You have to do X, Y, Z. They made up a whole bunch of shit to invalidate the gift. Anyway, so the professor I had was, and then there's a whole side story that's been written on this case for decades, right? So we spent more time on the side stories. And of course, the whole thing was all about the race of the two parties. And that actually, at the time this was done, she was a daughter of a former slave. And so that's, the connection and all that kind of stuff. And so the whole thing, and so it was just this complete, like it popped everyone in everybody's bubble. If you had any sense that the human beings making the decisions aren't shaped by our society and about, like you said, systemic racism and about those kind of things. And you want to have a belief in the system, but at the same time, when the system's fucked up and the people running it get fucked up, then you don't get outcomes that, and that's what, there's a whole thing about the Constitution. We don't have to go into all that and about the way it was written, about how, this whole thing was organized in a certain way to keep certain things in principle. But like you're saying, we believe, you want to believe, but like as a lawyer, I sued doctors. I never trusted a doc. I still don't. You know what I mean? I'm terrible with the medical profession because I have all this ingrained biases about how I've had them on the stand and they've lied to me. Just face lie. So I'm super conspiracy theorist. I don't trust people, in those kind of professions that have a lot of power. And it took a while to learn that, but after that, I'm kind of tainted now in that way. So, but I get your point about being in that system. And they teach you you're supposed to do this and this and this. And if you stay in those boundaries, then you're just following the same shit that's always gone on, and you're not really effectuating kind of the purposes that you want to gain. So,
and it's got to be an evolution. Like that's our job, is to question, to not just go along. And I say, look, you can take the Hippocratic Oath, or you can take the hypocritical oath.
Right.
So what you experienced was a whole bunch of people that took the hypocritical oath. And that happens all the time. I sometimes, when I go out in speaking engagements, I go, I work with people with very severe mental health disorders. They have bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, substance use, and that's just my coworkers.
Well, there's no doubt. Okay, ready. All right, then let's go. I've got a couple things on MVP, but I do want to get to, there's a couple other things and I know, and we really appreciate your time. So one, I put about working with MVP and vets. We've kind of hit on that. We had a question about common symptoms and how that overlaps with veterans. But one of the things is we've always talked in MVP about know your own shit, own your own shit, and share your shit. And so, and then the other part of that is it's okay not to be okay, see it, own it, and then ask for help. So those are kind of guidelines, is that, we're trying to make it, it's not okay to not be okay in the sense that we're just going to leave you there, but acknowledging it and owning it. And just, it's that whole thing, like and I want to kind of get back to mindfulness in that way. So that is one thing that we're trying to make it okay. The Colts have this thing about take away the stigma, no more stigma about mental health issues. If you need help, come forward. Nobody's going to penalize you and all that. So all those kind of things. So I think that kind of summarizes a lot of the work that we've been talking about, but I do want to if I want to kind of just transition a little bit. So those kind of identities, as you think about healing, which is a really, really broad kind of term. So can you describe for me kind of in your work at this point, what is it? What do you think healing really is? And I know it's so personal and each story is really unique, but what are some common themes about the things that you've seen working in and what really helps people move into a place where they can find some peace, regain control over their life, and kind of live in that kind of manner, what we might describe as that healing journey?
I think you just described it very well. You just said it, having some calm. So for me, everything's like salsa. I mean, I was like 34 the first time I went to a Mexican restaurant, because in New England, we like lobster. We don't eat, we didn't at those days. I can remember the first Mexican restaurant. So I realized that they had to teach me that there's mild, moderate, and severe salsa. Like, okay, so, they should be labeled because who knows?
Right.
Well, so is your mental health. So when you talk about healing, does it have to be gone to be healed? Like, no. So I think that's it, right? And so I think for me, it's that idea of severity, because I have OCD and I love it because now it's mild, sometimes moderate, but mostly now in the one time it was severe because as an anxious kid, I was trying to get everything in order, right? Okay. So it was outside of me. If I could fix that, then maybe the crazy family wouldn't be so crazy. I love it now because when I go to people's houses, like Patricia, you guys met, came up and did some wonderful stuff at Sweepo Ranch. And I stayed in her house. And she always says to me, Susie, I love when you come up because you always leave my bedroom better than what you found it. And I found it pretty cool. So this idea that it's manageable, what you just said, that it's manageable, everything, all these effects are manageable. And who's to say that you have to heal a symptom? What if you just get to make it a little less severe? What if situational awareness and this idea that shit's hitting the fan, and as a combat veteran, you don't want to have that maybe situational awareness all the time. You always have it, but it's mild. You're looking around, everything seems fine. But when the shit is the fan, you're still able to come in. So to answer your question, I don't want to heal everything. Why would I want to heal everything?
And you can't. And I'll give you this example and tell me what you think about this. When I did a lot of work in the restorative justice world, and we did a lot of work with crime victims and victimization. And we always, in training, kind of non-victims around victimization, we would take a piece of paper and, we'd have them write the name of a loved one on there, and then we would crumple it up, which feels kind of disrespectful. And then we'd ask them to smooth that out as best you can. And you can kind of get it smooth, but once you crumple a piece of paper, there's all the wrinkles in it.
That's right.
And that's what we talked about victimization in that way, is that, once you go through that experience, there is no going back through the portal, So healing in that sense is about, well, we're going to smooth this out as best we can. You know what I mean? That piece of paper from then on, it's always going to be crumpled in some way. And here's the thing, and it's okay.
It's okay. You can still read the name.
That's what I mean. And so when it still functions, it still does everything. It's
Right.
different now. And so it has all these wrinkles on it, and it's okay. And in a way, like, we come to admire wrinkled paper. You know what I mean? That we can appreciate it. It's like a broken bone. Like, theoretically, it heals stronger, right? Now it's got this thing in it and this mark and that wound, or you have a scar, but it heals up. You're never the same after those injuries in that kind of way. So I think that's a great point about the healing process. Isn't about eradicating it like back to game zero. That's not it. It's like, how do I integrate this into my life in a way that my life can make sense and I can find peace and I can interact in the world in a way that's still moderately pro-social. So,
and the trouble with, you just brought up a great point about a broken leg, and I use that actually as a metaphor sometimes. When you give someone a mental health diagnosis, it's based on 5 to 7 symptoms. You can have so many of those symptoms and the severity. We actually do look at the severity, right? So when you talk to people and they say, oh, I'm bipolar, today, always, like, how much today, right? Like, and I'm like, when are you not then? Because there is a possibility that those symptoms will lessen down to being very mild, and therefore they're actually not part of the DSM then, okay? So if I walked up to you and said, I have a broken leg, and you go, let me see your leg, Susie. I want to see the cast, and I hold my leg up and there's no cast on it. They go, and I'm running. They go, you mean you had a broken? No, I have a broken leg. When did you break it? Oh, 10 years ago. Well, though you still maybe have the crack in there that's fused now and healed, but you wouldn't actually say you have a broken leg. You would say, I had a broken leg. I had bipolar disorder. I had severe OCD at one time. I don't now. Now it's mild and I love it. And I use it for my well-being and the well-being of others. So I think you're onto something. I mean, that's why the mental health evolution is so important. We started modern psychology by drilling holes in people's heads and letting demons out. Please don't try that at home. Don't do that. That's not a good thing. So we're at a wonderful time. And Emma, you're the new generation. You're the one that's going to go, it's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you. And now you get to decide what happens. Now you get to do different to be different. Now we've got all the science that says when you weightlift, think about this. I used to think it was aerobics, and because, a scientific fact is only a fact until proven otherwise. So, but I want to see that, how it evolves. Weight training right now, the actual act, which I used to love to do. I won a bench press contest once, and I love that. That actually heals the brain quicker than any other activity. Now, I didn't say just improve the brain. I'm talking healing the brain. And now I understand that idea of contraction and expansion, getting stronger. The brain needs that too, not just to be challenged by math. So, right?
Well, the interaction, the somatic relationship between the brain, emotion, thought, and how the brain likes to dump all that shit into the body and how it gets expressed. And that's kind of where this conversation started about how illnesses end up a lot of times being driven by how we think and all that, which impacts then how we behave. So we don't work out, we get lonely, we get sad, we withdraw, we eat a bunch of crap. And then before you know it, everything's a mess and our body's going to hell. So all those kind of things fit together. Good. How much did you bench press in the contest?
I pressed 195. But I was a lot heavier then. I'm going to be one of those old people that gets smaller and smaller all the time. And so you have those shirts, then you walk around with those shirts. And I was 42 and I beat two 19-year-olds. So I was really proud of that. But I won't do it again. But boy, it was fun to just see it one time, right?
We might need a photo of that. I also just one kind of follow-up thought on what you guys were saying, but something that we always try to tell our clients or people I'm working with, it's obviously when we're doing yoga and physical activity, it's much easier, but something that I've always tried to remind people is move the energy through your body. And if you're feeling off, or if you're feeling like all of a sudden, like you're like even a personality shift, or all of a sudden you feel very depressed, or all of a sudden you're really anxious, or those OCD behaviors are like really flaring up, it doesn't mean we have to associate or take on all of those attributes, or all of a sudden I now have a broken leg again, or I now have bipolar disorder again. It doesn't mean we have to do that. It can really mean that we have energy, so chi, prana, whatever lineage you want to find it, but it's stuck in your body somewhere. And it's the more we kind of learn about our body and how we can study ourselves, and you don't have to go and study all these texts or anything, but noticing where if I'm having a lot of stomach pain, right around my solar plex, and I'm all of a sudden getting really angry, there's a correlation there. That's my anger center. That's my power center. Or if it's around my heart and all these boundaries are getting pushed, and we feel all that contraction and pressure, right in our chest, it's because that's our boundary center. That's our heart center. That's our balance. And if we're getting off balance, it's going to get flared up. And so I think it's just really important to remember, your body is trying to tell you something all the time. And when you're starting to feel those, it's really cool when you can start to connect the dots instead of being I'm doomed, or now I'm depressed, and now I'm anxious, and now I'm going to do all this, react in that way. It's I'm learning these things about myself, and that's all it has to be sometimes.
And this idea of energy while you work is so important, Emma. It's so important. They always say, well, that's woo-woo shit, right? I'm going to do your chi and your energy. Oh yeah? Well, you'll pick up this goddamn phone and you'll press some nut, and that energy will go up to some satellite in space and come back down and find your phone. But I can't send my energy anywhere. I can't feel my energy. I can't use it for a communication. And also, what happens when your heart stops? Energy leaves your body. That's exactly what happens. So, boy, when people start telling me that, I'm what do you think's electrical energy in your brain? It's all connected. It's all what we deserve to know about and to take care of.
Well, I think even off of that, because sometimes you're around, and I'll use Bruce as an example, but he has a really strong energy field. He has a really strong energy field, and when he's around, and you can pick up on it. Or I think that's what's one of the most beautiful things with working with horses is you think we're disconnected, and all of a sudden you're like I have chills down my back, I'm crying, I'm having such a physical reaction, and it's we're not disconnected. I was listening, I can't remember what I was listening to. I'll find it, but it was talking about how none of us are actually disconnected. And the quote was an island's not really an island because it's all part of the same ecosystem.
Right. You go deep enough and you'll find that bottom of that ocean will travel and connect with another continent over there. You're absolutely right. It's not an island.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Emma. Love
big energy.
Yeah, I know. Well, and just think about it. It's like a knock on the door. Your body's yo, dude, this is fucked up. We're not in alignment. Hey, hey, would you pay attention to me over here? And we've kind of always historically, we've gone to some super doc to give us meds. I was going to ask you about that. We don't need to get into it though, but I think that was the end of the transitions, just in my listening to the data and trying to pay attention to it. The over-reliance, how we thought mental health issues were all a chemical imbalance. Everything could be fixed by a pill. And I'm not to say that certain medications in certain settings aren't still appropriate, but I think we're learning a lot more about that, like the trauma that you talked about talk therapy and all that kind of stuff. can be really, really powerful for people, and the reliance on medication fixing it with that, because there's so many negatives to it. Really, I think people are re-examining that. At least that's what my understanding kind of is, which seems to be like a really good thing, because the more we can be directly in connection with our body and our mind and our spirit, then the more we take control over our own healing. So I want to toss two things out to you, and then we're going to let you get rolling into your holiday weekend. So I know you want to probably get to a football game. So there's two methodologies.
I played football.
Oh,
I was a fullback on a powder puff team when I was 17 years old.
That's amazing.
we better get a picture of that too. Okay, so
I got a picture.
things. Are you familiar? There's an organization, Internal Family Systems.
IFS.
Okay, so that's kind of this idea that it kind of debunks this notion that, there's only one identity, there's this true self, and that's it. And this notion is that through life, we have these experiences and we develop what we call parts. And these parts kind of live back there, and some of the parts get exiled because they end up doing some things and the rest of the parts don't like them and they push them out. We have some protector parts who socially try to protect us from doing things that, the system doesn't like, that kind of stuff. And then there's something called firefighters and all that. So that, and just this, but the one thing I really, really appreciate about that is it doesn't make pathological the notion of having kind of different personalities. Like sometimes we say, well, there's a part of me that wants to go to the show, but a part of me wants to stay home. Well, you really have two parts. There's a part that really wants to social engage and get all that energy and do all that kind of stuff. Part that's really tired. You spent 7 days working this week and you need to take a nap and all that kind of stuff. So I guess curious about that. And then the other one, I sent this to you and I know you didn't have time to look at it, MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy.
I started to watch.
Okay. Well, and I just thought it was really, so it's more, and it's right in, and you were part of the, mindfulness courses that we did, but it's in depression and or other mental health conditions. It's helping the person develop mindfulness practices that would allow them to differentiate from whatever their kind of illness or whatever their diagnosis is. And the person I was talking about, I'm forgetting his name right now, but I can look it up. But anyway, it was just this notion that my thoughts are not facts. And we talk about that all the time in the huddles, like your thoughts are just thoughts. They're not you. They don't define you. You're not bound to your thoughts. Same with your emotions and all that kind of stuff. And then their big thing, because his primary field of study was depression. And he's constantly telling folks, and you said this earlier, like, I am not an addict. I have addictive, issues in my life, but I'm personally not an addict. And that's his thing, is that you are not your depression.
That's right.
I am not, depression.
You don't even know if it's your depression.
Right.
You live with a depressed person, you can become depressed to mimic.
So this whole notion is this distancing from thought and emotion in a way that you learn to examine it. Right. You can see it. And then his big thing, and this is so in line with all the mindfulness, is remaining curious about, gosh, I feel really angry about that, or I feel really triggered by this, or whatever it is. Or if I'm not feeling well today, it's like separating and just not getting pulled into it and saying, okay, what's really trying to go on with it, and learning about that self-exploration and all that kind of stuff. So just kind of want to toss those, because both of those make a lot of sense to me, and just wondering if there's those, and or is there anything else out there in the world that of this kind of therapy stuff that you really like?
Well, the idea too that some people say the horse mirrors you. That's why horses are so great, but they didn't mirror you. Every horse that you went in with Emma and Bruce was different towards you, but they did tell you their truth. They did demand that you take a look at yourself, not just them. So that's what they did, is they were like, the dog, not so much. Dog's like, okay, I'm wrong. Sorry. Just pet me, love me, feed me. Right? They'll always take the blame. The horse won't. And, to go back to what you're saying, they
set boundaries.
Yeah, they did.
They're willing to set a boundary, and you don't like it. Like,
so get your shit together and don't come in here and play with me.
Right.
Right? Because you're not being congruent right now. As I always say, every thought I have is not true. So I do T to T, and every feeling is not a fact, F to F. Right? Yeah. So you can, use that. And Al-Anon, actually, 12-step programs have been saying this for over 60 years before all the research came in, because they realized that what people were thinking and feeling about themselves came from what happened to them. Not necessarily that's just the way I am. When people say that to me, I go, oh, only if you lived in a vacuum bubble somewhere and didn't ever meet anybody, that might be the way you are. But if you've met somebody, probably not. And that's mindfulness, cognitive behavior. I don't even think you need to put the cognitive behavioral therapy with it. I appreciate that we do that because insurance companies need it. But mindfulness in and of itself is cognitive behavioral therapy, which, by the way, I want you to know, both of you, that Oro is going to put that in the schedule now, and we're going to have that as part of our IOP sessions starting in a week or two. So you may be getting a call from me very shortly about that. And I agree with you. You get to be curious. That's the word that we should all have. You know, children are naturally curious. One of the reasons we love horses because they're naturally curious. Then when we start using reward and punishment, children stop getting curious. When we start being dictators, I spell that D-I-C-K, when we are authoritarian as opposed to authoritative as parents, children get anxious and depressed because they've had experience with parents not liking what they do, so they're trying to adjust themselves to what the parent likes or doesn't like. So children oftentimes stop being curious because they're trying to manage their parents. They're trying to manage that whole system. And so that's why their thoughts and feelings are not necessarily theirs. And what you're asking people to do, both of you, is to be curious, to be like, whoa, why do I feel that way? What just happened to me? What is going on in my stomach right now besides the pizza that I just ate? Because I've eaten that pizza before and I didn't have this. So this idea that we're asking people to be curious. Now, you can't be curious about yourself if you're always putting yourself down. I don't know. I box with George Foreman's son. Very proud of that. Craft boxing. Never once has they ever taught me to give myself an uppercut. Ever. I've never been taught to beat myself up. My dad taught me that, but never have I been taught to do that. And the healing that you're talking about, Bruce, is being curious about yourself because you deserve it.
And without judgment.
Without judgment, without an agenda, without judgment.
So because if we're going to explore all that shit and how we felt and the things that happened to us, doing so without just setting more blame, putting more shit in your backpack or your rucksack, because I've heard you talk about that thing. And just being willing to unpack that thing and say, God, here's all this shit in here, and just be grateful that you're figuring it out and not judge it. And because what I really like about it is every day is a new opportunity to wake up and make a new choice about who I want to be today and how I want to show up. And that's the opportunity.
That's it. That's the practice.
The only reason we look back is not to live in the past or to be remorseful over the past, but it's to understand the past and how it may trigger me into feeling and thinking and reacting in this present moment. But the lack of judgment thing, I think, is really huge.
It's huge. And that is because we are usually brought up by people who have an agenda for us because they want us to, as children, to make them look good. So we have to be careful about that. When parents say to me, oh, my daughter just got into Harvard. And I go, well, you didn't. So why are you bragging about it? They're the ones that did the work, not you. Tell me something you did as exceptional this day, not you.
Okay. Tell us about what are your self-practices for your own self-care? What do you do? So I know you bench press a lot. You like to run marathons.
I box now. You
box. So you got a lot of physical stuff, but I just always kind of curious about, because you're in the mental health business.
Right.
And you help others maintain their mental health. And so what are your practices that you use to take care?
So one of the practices is I still dance. Most of the time with my ass, and I don't mean my ass, I meant my donkey, out in the pasture with the donkeys and the horses. So I will continue to dance forever. That is my joy. That's my intrinsic joy. We talked about that earlier. So I continue to dance. And yesterday, my daughter and I were dancing in the kitchen while we were putting this together because they had a whole thing of Michael Jackson songs. And so we just couldn't help ourselves. So we do that. The other thing that I do is I tell the truth. That's a daily practice for me because I was brought up to lie. I was such a good liar because my dad was so abusive that I could have been a triple agent. That's what I should have been in my life. So telling the truth to myself and to others is the most healing, wonderful thing. And it makes me laugh at myself. So when I own my shit, and then even when I've done something I'm really not proud of, I just own it and say, okay, I own that. I did it this morning to my grandson. I had to go out and apologize to him and own my shit for what I did this morning. So that's a daily practice of owning my stuff and being honest with myself. I think probably the other thing is to be kind and and I don't ever want to say that I'm always kind of, it's just the practice of kindness is so important to me. And the last one is to be able to laugh at myself. Like this humor that I have, because I was the person that made everybody laugh in my family because they were always fucked up. So I was the one that had to like keep it light. What a superpower that is. That ability to make people laugh and at your own expense in a good way, superpower. So I try to make sure that when I'm getting cranky and because I'm overtired and I think I will start to laugh at myself, I'll find something to laugh at. So that's those are basically my go-to, to be honest, to be kind, and to be curious and have a sense of humor. It's that idea, like, what's going on for me? And to take care of myself. I mean, man, that's important. I don't wait, look for, expect anybody to take care of me. I will always ask for help and I won't always get it. I know how to give it to myself. And I know some of the people that will say yes. And if they can't that day, I'll find somebody else. There's that's the gift of being connected. I'm a tribal person. That's how I was brought up with my stepdad. So I'm in. Of course, the horses are always there.
Tribe Suzi, we want to be in.
Yeah, I wanted to. Well, you're still up north. When you're coming down a little further south, what's your plans? Oh, we'll talk offline because I don't want everybody to know where you are.
Yeah. But anyway, and that whole notion of I'm still in the process of forgiving other people for not being the person I expected them to be. You know what I mean? Like I do. Like, I know how I think and I know how I want people to behave in certain situations, and the energy that you put into being disappointed because of the expectations that you set on others, it's just like letting go of that whole shit. And like, I mean, I think it's still good to set boundaries and to clarify those expectations if you're in a working relationship and all that. But at the same time, everybody's so freaking different, and just giving people the freedom to do that. And then like, because you're just not disappointed if you don't have those kind of expectations.
So someone had to teach you that, Bruce. I mean, children don't do that. You know what I mean? They come in and they want you to be a certain way. And then when you're not, they cry and then they still play with you. Did you ever notice that? I mean, they kind of like just keep moving forward, and we're the ones that hold that resentment. So you have to be trained to do that. That's from disappointment. Disappointment is sadness. Because remember, I only deal with 3 emotions in my life because that makes life so simple. And all the rest are a combination. So that idea that we are resentful or sad or disappointed because someone isn't the way we want them to be, we had to learn that somehow. That's important. And then you get to ask yourself, where did I learn that? Who did I learn that from? Who was disappointed in me, who I wasn't what they wanted to be? Because that's usually where it comes from. You had to experience it first.
Yeah,
that's right. And then you do it to others.
Yeah.
What are the 3 emotions that you deal with?
So much like 3 colors, there's only 3 primary colors. There's yellow, green, and blue. Now, I'm sorry, yellow, red, and blue. I just put that wrong. Yellow, red, and blue. Why do I know that those are the 3 primary? Because if I put blue and yellow, that's how I get green. If I put red and blue together, I get purple. If I put yellow and red together, I get orange. So you can't make red, can't make blue, can't make yellow. Would you agree with that, Emma? I mean, right? You can't. But they make, and if you put them all together, you get brown. So I know those are primary. So for me, the 3 primary emotions are, people will say, if I ask people, this is how it happens: happiness, sad, and anger. And I go, what about fear? Oh yeah, fear. And I go, well, that's 4 then. And they go, oh, wait, 1, okay. So one of them's purple. So the idea that we use anger probably more than anything else, which is either irritation, frustration, rage, anger, rage, and murder. It's the 5 levels of anger. So irritation, frustration, anger, rage, and murder. One of those has to be a combination. So I change happiness to joy. And I do that because I just said to you, dancing makes me joyous. Happy is subjective. Joy is intrinsic. So whatever makes you joyful, you figured it out as a kid and you still have it. We usually don't use it. And then we start to look to other people, which is what you were talking about, Bruce, to make us happy. If you do this, then I'll be happy. No, I dance. I don't care if you're dancing with me. I'm joyous. And then fear and sadness. So when you talk about anger, you can't, Emma, I'll ask you this question. Have you ever had your boyfriend or somebody, you're upset about something, and he goes, why are you so upset about that? And you look right at him, go, why aren't you upset about it is the question. Yeah. See,
So I have.
Yeah, because it didn't happen to him.
Right.
So anger has to come from past fear and sadness that was never acknowledged. So when you're a little kid and you're sad and scared and it's not acknowledged, it turns to anger. You got to shove it down and keep it down there. And then it gets hard and it turns to anger. Now, 10 years later, 20 years later, someone's doing something similar. That's a trigger that you were talking about, Bruce. Somebody's doing something that is one of my core wounds. Well, I start getting irritated. I start getting afraid. And I have to ask myself, what am I afraid of and what am I sad about at that moment? At that moment, what am I?
So the three are joy, fear, and sadness.
Right. And if you don't honor fear and sadness in the moment, it will turn to anger. So my dad didn't pay attention to me, always criticized me, put all of his needs first. I walk into the grocery store. That checkout counter person is having a personal conversation on my time. I'm irritated. I'm frustrated. Oh, that's just like what my dad did. Work was more important. Everything was more important than me. So when I get in a situation where someone's not doing their job, which is to give me some attention here in order so I can get out of the store, I get irritated, right? But I know it now. So you know what I do now, Emma? I hate going in the grocery store. So I walk in the grocery store with this smile. I go in and I get shit and I always buy something I really want. So at least I'm happy that I'm there. And I go up to the checkout counter. And sure enough, they're always having a personal conversation with someone. When it's my turn, I go, hi, how are you today? I do just the opposite of what I want to do. Just the opposite. I've met so many wonderful people that I would have gotten mad at before because of my past hurt.
Look at the growth and healing.
I love what you're saying though, because like that you don't want to do it, because I think that's this misconception that when people are joyous or outgoing or choose to see things a different way, that's what they want to do. And it's really one of the practices that keep us from falling back into our original behavior of anger, fear.
Yes, right. That's right.
And that's where knowing thyself, you have a clear vision about who you want to be and how you want to show up. She does that for me all the time. Like we're going in somewhere, I don't really want to go. It's not a group I want to see and all that kind of stuff. And she always talks to me about, and I'm kind of like, well, if I just hang back, like, I don't really want to fuck around with this. She's like, Dad, you can't do that. People notice, then it's
big energy.
Then it's an issue. So if my energy is not big enough, then it's like, there's a problem. And then sometimes my energy is too big, but it's kind of having that awareness. And then if you've clarified that for yourself before, like you said, honesty is a really big value for you and it makes you feel good. Those are the things. So if we start to get faced with that, that's where I think it takes the practice. Yeah. I know I want to be honest. I know I want to be kind. I'm in this situation. I don't feel like, I don't want to tell them to go fuck themselves and get out of my face.
But I want.
But the other value is more important to me. And so as I'm approaching, having the curiosity, say, this is how I'm feeling. Okay. And then making a decision on how you want to show up. And that is so hard in those moments. But like when we do survive it, like, and I've been in the exact same store situation. And like when I do it right, and like really engaging and like super happy, you're right. It almost turns out the other way. And so like I feel happier about that than getting through the checkout line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's so great.
And it's, you can't think your way into right action. You can only act your way into right thinking. That's from AA. That's before neuroscience. I mean, true neuroscience that we have now. So I know that. I live by that practice that, I got to do different to be different. I can't think. It's like when people say, well, just be grateful. Fuck that shit. I can't always be grateful. I'm not always happy about being grateful, but I can act nice.
Having a gratefulness practice has some value, but I'm with you on that.
Right. I can act a little nicer, right?
It's like the physical stuff, right? I mean, does somebody feel like going for a 4-mile run every day? Hell no.
No.
But like, we got to do it on the days you don't want to, because when you're done, you always feel better and it's still good for your body and all that stuff. So, okay, let me then, Deborah, you were kind of questioning.
No, it's good.
Okay.
It's good.
We kind of talked about holidays and all that, but I want to do this. So you also have a new podcast. So my wrap up.
Wait. One real quick. Emma, when you get after him because of his big energy, you know what I would ask him? How is how you are right now going to protect you? Who taught you to protect yourself that way? See, that's a protection. That's not being an asshole. That's actual protection that he had to create in order to get through some situations.
I have 5 core protectors.
Yeah.
I have names for them. I know them. Like we talk all the time. Like I'm pretty good on that now, but that doesn't mean they still don't jump in sometimes.
But I also think, and while we can kind of laugh at it now, we like something that we kind of do is we bring humor to the situation, So if one of us is more uncomfortable and something's going on or we'll just say if you are, and he'll tell me those things and we can kind of laugh about it and make it into a thing. And it's just moving the energy through instead of just letting it be stale and like festering.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The more you talk about, when you get curious and you talk about it, this used to protect me in those situations where my dad dragged me to this or this happened or whatever. And then you go, oh yeah, I get it. And then all of a sudden it's like 50%. Watch this. My daughter's trying to sneak in. Go ahead. They're over there, Kirsha. Go ahead. Sneak in. Watch this.
Can't see her at all.
So sneaky.
Can't see anything.
There she is. They're right there. You can see where I get my humor.
There's a fluff.
Come over here. I want you to just see her for a second because I haven't showered in like 3 days. She hasn't showered in 3 days.
Hello.
Stay here, father, daughter.
Hi, I just need the car keys because my son stole my car. So I'm stealing my mom's car.
Excellent.
And you have to tell her that if she's doing podcasts, she's going to block her window because it's.
We don't want to hurt her.
Look, I'm trying to there you go. I blocked it.
Perfect.
Wow. That's kind of fun because you've told us so many stories about her.
I know. Oh,
Just in a good way. They're all wonderful.
they are all wonderful. Bye, honey.
Bye.
If the dogs bark, there's no one here to tell them to be quiet.
Okay, good. We'll let the dogs bark.
Oh,
So I
okay.
appreciate you saying that. Go ahead, Bruce. I interrupted you with I knew you knew what that meant.
Yeah, no. I don't want to we want to cover everything, so or at least get it done. So, well, been very good. So I want to give you a chance. So you got a new podcast called Crazy Well. I got a chance to be on it, so that was super fun. And so with that, and then I guess, like you said, you've been at MVP for 3 years. So I guess I'm just curious about dreams and visions for your future. Like, do you see where your trajectory is? Does this podcast take off? Are you going to be a movie star? Where are you going next?
So it's funny you should ask that because I have been asked to do that.
And you were in the MVP movie. You did a great job.
This part of me.
Yes, you were amazing.
Yeah, that was
Really
I
good.
played Nate's mother. The back of my head did. So yeah, this idea of Be Crazy Well. It's a wonderful organization that sponsors it called Coming Home Well, which is a veteran organization that decided they were going to serve the veteran community by doing many podcasts. So I'm one of many podcasts there of some incredible people that are giving out wonderful information. So yeah, we've been talking about expanding different things in my life. And doing that. So George Foreman and I, the son, have been talking about a whole mental health evolutional thing that we're starting to put together. So that's going to be kind of fun. And then in terms of what I'm going to do next, well, Logan's done with high school in May, and I'm looking at an Airstream. So brand new Airstream. And here's what I think I'm going to do, because I have a Ford truck type of car, Explorer. And I think I'm just going to drive around the country because I have so many people I know in so many areas, and they keep saying, come visit. And I thought, all right, you asked for it. And I may end up on the East Coast, actually. I may do that. I may go back to the East Coast for a while and do some work back there. I'm not sure. So yeah, we'll see, but definitely going to go around the country, starting in June, probably, because I can do all my work pretty much the way we're doing this now. I know that some people have offered me some full-time positions, but I'm not so sure I'm good at that.
Yeah, with you on that. Hey, did you read Matthew McConaughey's Red Light, Green Light?
I haven't, but people keep telling me to read that.
Well,
I got to read that.
He's a great section there because in between some of his movies, especially in his earlier, when he had a little bit bigger gaps, he was a huge, just put an Airstream on the back of the truck. Yeah. And he would just drive and then just go into these local, trailer parks and just meet people, build that was his kind of really getaway thing. So, right. And even after he got pretty famous, he did that a bunch. So there's 2 or 3 chapters where he kind of talks about people he met, experiences he had, and just life on the road and all that kind of stuff, and how freeing and liberating it was for that. Yeah, we're kind of in the Airstream market ourselves, so we're kind of curious about all that. So
That's great.
yeah, that's
great.
pretty good. Okay, then so I guess so. Hidden Pearls is all about finding the hidden pearls, which we believe everybody's got one inside them, about being kind and doing good to others. And I think inherently we believe that, the good stuff is in there. We just need a little help sometimes getting it all out. So, and I just wonder, have you come across any people and/or organizations, particularly that you feel like are kind of a hidden pearl and I guess the way we close this out is things that give you hope in today's world, because we work with some tough situations. I mean, I know you get those potential suicide calls. You get people when they're really stressed out. You get people when they're not in a very good space. And I know when you get through those, and I mean, some of the stories that we've heard through the huddles with MVP are very hopeful. We've seen people make unbelievable and dramatic kind of shifts in their life. Just wondering if there's anything particular of recent that really gives you hope in this work.
One of the things that is very clear to me is that anybody that chooses to face themselves and what was done to them and then how they did to others, those would be every single person that has said yes to going to any kind of treatment program, any kind of retreat, any kind of mindfulness group, anybody who reaches out and says, I want to know. So there's 2 kinds of people in the world: people who want to know. They really want to know. They don't believe they know it all. They know that they deserve to create a different way of being. And then there's some people who don't want to know. They already think they know, or what you want to offer them is going to take away what they believe is their power. So when you ask me what gives me hope and who are the people that I look to, are people like you. People who want to know, people who are doing the work on themselves, not just trying to fix everybody else, because we don't need any more hypocrites in this world. We need people who are truly going to do the work themselves along with others, not for others, not to others, but with. So that's my grandson. That is my daughter. That's all the people that I meet on a daily basis who call me and I get to learn from. I have the honor, the actual honor, to be able to learn from these amazing men and women in the world that are struggling to create a person that they want to continue living this life with. Those are the people, all the young people that are out there making sure that we still have a democracy. Anybody who's willing to put their ass on the line, I'm in awe of. And that includes you too. And my only concern is I don't want you to be so hidden. I don't want the pearl to be hidden, and I don't want you to be hidden, because we need you. So I would ask people to come out of the clamshell, oyster shell, and be seen and be heard. That's right. There it is. There, it's right there. So be seen and be heard, and help us create that which we all deserve together.
Okay. All right. Let's see. You sent me some stuff. So if there's any other links about how people can find you if they want to. So
sure. Put my number in there. Do you know my numbers like in bathroom? I always joke and say they're in some bathroom stalls around LA. So definitely put up my number and my email, and people can contact me anytime they want. Why not?
Are you an Instagrammer and any of that stuff?
I am. And so it's so creative. I just used my name, Suzi Landolphi. I know.
We'll also link your podcast if anybody wants to check out your show.
So just you send us those links so we get them right. And then we'll drop all those stuff. And then each week we donate to a charity of choice from our guest. So, we've given.
I have a wolf sanctuary, MVP. I have a horse sanctuary, Lifesavers, Wild Horse Rescue. And you're going to ask me to choose one? That's like choosing your children.
Well,
so I'll give you all 3. Give them each $10. That will be helpful.
All right. You send me the donation link for the organizations that you want, and then we will do that. And then we'll post a little bit of info on that as we do that to give those names out. And you always have the option. So there's, I think 4 home games left. And
You want to come to a game?
so if you want to get to a Niners game, we are happy to provide a couple of tickets. So if you want to look at the schedule.
When are you going to be there? Are you going to be at all of them? All the
Yes.
next 4? Oh, I'm in. I'm in.
Well, just
So-
take a look, let us know. And
Hey, wait, I forgot something. I'm going to be up in Sacramento, December 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and then Woodside with Patricia at this big Equus conference. I'm giving 2 presentations, one in a room and one in an arena. So I'm there.
That's
Thursday
the-
night.
Dolphins.
Yeah, December 4th is the Dolphins game.
Which one are Michael and Patricia coming to? And for people listening, they're the people who own Sweet Bow.
Okay.
They haven't quite, so I've offered, but they've just been traveling, doing all that kind of stuff. So
Perfect.
We'll get together on that because I am coming up and I'll be close by. And absolutely. So when's the last game? Tell me how long I got to try to figure this out.
January 7th.
Oh, good.
Or it
Oh,
could
great.
be either the 7th or the 8th, because in the playoffs, they kind of bounce. Depends on your seed, who wins and all that kind of stuff. So,
Okay.
but the last 2 games,
so it'd either be
a Saturday or Sunday, the 7th or the 8th. Is
Okay.
the last home game.
all right.
All right, cool. Any final words of wisdom that you want to share? Anything I should have asked if I
Do a little bit more.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up. That's like the best wisdom I can say. Stop criticizing yourself, right? Create the person you deserve to be and the life you deserve to live. Do not beat yourself up. Or I'll get George Foreman to come out here and he'll show you how you.
Solid threat. It's a
Yeah.
solid threat.
All right.
Actually, you should get him on your podcast. Would you like that?
Hook us up.
Sure.
I'll hook you up with the
Okay.
Foreman. All right.
It's super fun. All right. Well, thank you so very much. Anything you want to close with? or
No, this was
thoughts?
awesome, Susie. Thank you.
All right.
So much joy.
Right, and just a reminder out to folks, so it's okay to go to your old house, old family, all that stuff, set boundaries, take care of yourself. You don't have to stay the whole time. You don't have to do everything that everybody tells you. Work on being kind, have a clear vision of who you want to be and how. And you know what? If you just want to say fuck it, that's okay too, because like
That's okay.
really okay, and don't beat yourself up for it. And if there is a family for you that is outside your biological family, that is okay as well. And I guess I just want to
That
close too, because we I don't know if we did this in the recording, but you talked about your younger brother who was gay and what a great relationship you guys had. So I guess I just want to send out to our love and support and condolences to the families, in Colorado with the shooting there, and just, what an outrage that is, and our disappointment, and also happening on transgender, I can't, if I'm getting it wrong, but Transgender Awareness kind of day, and just the fear that people live in because of either their gender or sexual identities and that. And so we just want to offer support in that world, and condolences and that. And so, and again, it's just another way of hopefully uniting, becoming a tribe, and honoring each other's differences, and also remembering about the ways in which we're really alike. We want to care for our family, we want to love others, we want to be connected, we want to fulfilling work and that kind of stuff. And so many of the other things really are just who we are as people. But there's a great quote, and I think I said this last week, but the things that are different about me are the things that make me me.
That's right.
And if we erase all the differences, then people truly can't be themselves. And so I just, trying to embrace that and honor those differences in a way and celebrate them in a way that makes everything a bit richer for all of us. So, all right, Susie, thank you so much for your time. Happy Thanksgiving. Have a great weekend. And then we'll look forward to hopefully having you up for the Dolphins game if that works, and then send us links.
I
and we'll
will.
get donations out. Okay, you take care. Have a
So,
super
right
great
now.
weekend. All right. Thank you. Enjoy. And I tell you to have more turkey, but you ate it all already.
I know. I'm going to go down and have just stuffing now. and pumpkin pie.
All right. Thank you so much.
I
Take
love you
care.
guys.
Bye,
Thank you.
Susie.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for that show. Obviously, there were a lot of different lessons from everyone, I would say. So, take what you need. Don't feel like you have to implement everything at once, but just be really gracious and compassionate with yourself. I know Susie always talks about being curious. And whenever we are talking about self-healing, one of the things that we always like to remember is to be curious, compassionate, and consistent, right? So we always want to have that curiosity of what's going on. We always want to be self-compassionate. And so just showing up with love, not asking in a judgmental, angry way, but just being really loving for whatever's going on. And then be consistent. it's a practice. You have to keep showing up. You have to keep asking those questions. You have to remain curious. You have to remain compassionate, and you aren't going to see the results or find the healing if you're not consistent with it. So just a reminder. And also, if you are one of those people who during the holidays, you're feeling that friction or feeling a little bit of tension, go out and go for a walk. Go for a walk, because getting outside in nature, getting some fresh air, just getting away and moving, something that I always like, I call them wisdom walks with my clients, but it's get outside. And so number one, you're getting fresh air, you're moving your body. So you're actually getting those endorphins moving, but you're just resetting. And so when you can do that, you don't have to have all the answers, but sometimes in those moments when I can't figure out like what's going on, or like, how can I make this situation better? Or like, maybe you're finding some friction, like what could I say in this situation to make it better? Or how could I be? Just going and asking and then breathing. I try to like match my step with my breath count. So like if I'm breathing on a 4 count, I'll take 4 steps. And as I exhale, I take 4 more steps, so just finding a rhythm of your breath in your body to where your thoughts aren't just spinning out of control. But either way, I just want to say thank you. Good luck to everybody during the holidays. Go for a walk. I promise it is going to make you feel better. And also, if you want to be connected, we'll have all the donation links. We'll have all of Suzi's contact information, and she is dead serious about if you want to call her, you can. She's incredible that way. And if you're a veteran looking for support, Emerging Vets and Players is where we will send you. It's incredible. And Suzi, like we said, is a clinical director, and you'll be working with her. And you'll get introduced to more horse stuff. So there's all these perks for joining the community. But if you are not, and you just want to help us out, you can always either donate to the organizations that we share. If you subscribe to our podcast or subscribe on YouTube, it helps our numbers go up so more people reach, or more people get the message and can find out about these organizations or these messages. And then if you leave us a 5-star review or comments, it also goes a long way. But either way, I just want to say thank you. We love you guys, and you are not alone. Go Niners.